So, good morning. The Shaqadud archaeological project aims to explore modes of cultural adaptation and resilience to climate change and hyperseasonality in the Eastern Sahel during the 10th to 2nd millennia BC. The research takes place in central Sudan, 50 kilometers east of the Nile, and today's semi-desert. Our research area includes the Shaqadud Mountains and several other surrounding mountain ranges and is many tens of square kilometers in size. There have never been rivers or lakes in this area during the Pleistocene and Holocene. Thus, local inhabitants did not have the opportunity in the past to exploit aquatic food resources, which are considered to constitute the main subsistence base for the inhabitants of the Sahara and Sahel region in the prehistory. We therefore speak of a non-aquatic or hinterland type of settlement and of hinterland type of cultural adaptations. Our project is radically different from other archaeological investigations in northern Africa, which keep returning to sites near open water bodies, especially large rivers. The hinterlands, despite occupying roughly 80% of the area of the Sahara-Sahel in prehistory, thus remains virtually unexplored. From series of questions of our project, I select the following. Firstly, in arid regions, natural resources are irregularly dispersed and their abundance can change unpredictably from year to year. Both place considerable demands on exploitation and settlement strategies. So what strategies did the inhabitants of Shaqadud use? Secondly, critical phases of two kinds characterize the Sahel: climatic fluctuations of different scales and annually recurring dry seasons. Both place high demands on resilience skills. How did the resilience of the local people work? Thirdly, in our area, rainfall was the only source of water and life, but its activity changed enormously during the past. There are now only general and coarse-grained models of precipitation dynamics for prehistoric northern Africa, which are not meaningfully applicable to research on the real interaction between humans and a changing environment. Therefore, we ask, how did local rainfall change, and how did the local biomes evolve in parallel? And fourthly, how did cultural evolution take place under these conditions? The project research team is robust and broadly interdisciplinary and includes 28 experts from different countries and disciplines of both archaeology and natural sciences. Since 2021, there have been 3 campaigns conducted with almost 1,200 man days spent in the field. Our field approach is broad and deep. It includes archaeological surface surveys, excavations at selected sites, mapping and 3D modeling of archaeological sites, study of material culture and ecofacts, geological and paleoenvironmental exploration and sampling, and ethnobotanical research. A selection of the main results. We found that the settlement in Shaqadud is surprisingly old. It dates back to the very beginning of the Holocene, to around 9700 BC. We can thus reliably demonstrate that the post-glacial colonization of northern Africa began more than a millennium earlier than previously thought. At the same time, we are the first to document that this post-glacial reoccupation could also have taken place along dry inland corridors, and not only along rivers and seashores as previously thought. This is an important contribution to the question of out of Africa, which is one of the top questions in Africanist archaeology and paleogenetics today. Most research so far has focused on the Shaqadud main site. This site is characterized by its enormous size, 36 hectares, the presentation of uniquely deep stratigraphy, and its great age. In fact, the site contains the longest known Holocene sequence in the Northeast Africa. Shaqadud main site was a central settlement surrounded by a series of smaller settlements in the wider area. How is it possible that the main site, which exceeds in size all known contemporary sites along the Nile, was created in such marginal hinterland conditions? Evidence is accumulating that the Shaqadud main site was created gradually as a result of countless seasonal aggregations of the people inhabiting the wider area during the dry phases of the year. It was therefore probably a seasonal center of life and social interaction. On the right, you can see a hypothetical settlement system with groups fragmenting and dispersing into surrounding area in the wet seasons and aggregating back at the core site in the dry seasons. Shaqadud main site also served as a central burial site. We have documented the presence of many dozens of graves and estimate that there may be thousands. They are marked on the slide by red ovals. We tentatively infer that burial rituals were one of the main means of social interaction and integration at Shaqadud for groups that otherwise had to live fragmented. We found a virtually identical settlement pattern in the neighboring Karkur El Azraq mountains. The picture shows another extremely large site at Shatib El-Bir from the same period as the Shaqadud main site. This indicates that the socio-economic organization documented at Shaqadud may have operated at a number of other sites, not only in Sudan, but potentially elsewhere in the Sahel and possibly the Sahara. However, nothing similar is known from the Nile Valley, which is very well explored and seems therefore a form of cultural adaptation specific to the hinterlands. This is at least our preliminary conclusion. Thus, it appears that the seasonality of local ecosystems structured settlement, economy and social life and was probably a key factor during the prehistoric and protohistoric periods. We also found out that the local inhabitants lived without pottery, which they adopted only later. This is the first case in the Sudan in the Holocene. Until now, it seemed that pottery production in Northeast Africa, which is one of the oldest in the world, was an important adaptive tool for exploiting food resources in arid conditions and should therefore be an important tool for colonization or reoccupation of North Africa. However, our data show that ceramics only emerged in Shaqadud during the succession of much more productive savanna ecosystems, savanna-type ecosystems. Thus, the earliest colonists had effective methods of landscape use and cultural sustainability in semi-desert conditions without having to rely on ceramics. Another surprising find is the extremely abundant evidence of the militarization of Shaqadud society during the 5th and 4th millennia BC. This is manifested by an abnormal number of surface finds of mace heads and axes made of exotic rocks and brought here from a distance of 300 kilometers or more. It is well known that in Egypt and northern Sudan, the militarization of society and the emphasis on warrior elites and material culture closely preceded the emergence of archaic states such as ancient Egypt and the first Kushite kingdom in Sudan, both on the Nile. In our region, outside the Nile, however, this mass militarization did not lead to the emergence of anything remotely resembling a state formation. We do not yet know what kind of political organization the local inhabitants had during this period, but it is already clear that we are touching on different trajectories of cultural evolution that may have been typical of the Sahelian hinterlands. These findings shed a new light on famous but previously unexplained East Sahel central sites from the late prehistory and protohistory, such as Mahal Tegrinos and Jebel Moya, explored by Italian and British teams. We have established collaborations with these teams, and there is a potential for future large collaborative projects that could address the question of trajectories of social and political evolution in the hinterlands of the Sahel. Another important finding is that the Shaqadud and its wide surroundings were full of water springs in prehistoric times. Given the available geological data, these springs must have been present in large areas east of the Nile, far beyond the perimeter of our research area. Thus, even far from Shaqadud, other significant archaeological sites similar to ours can be expected. We just need to get other archaeologists to start looking for them. The strongest and largest springs have been found directly at the most important settlement sites, at the Shaqadud main site, at the site S24 and Shatib El-Bir. At these sites, the archaeological debris is embedded directly in the spring tufa deposits, which indicates that people lived directly at the spring discharges. The water springs were no doubt crucial for the functioning of the local occupation, mainly during dry seasons. The tufa and travertine from these fossil springs provide a unique archive for reconstruction of the climate during the so-called African Humid Period, which lasted from the late Pleniglacial to about 2500 BC. The activity of local springs was dependent exclusively on rainfall, and this fact is of course of a major significance for reconstruction of the local rainfall history. For this reason, we have commenced a program of radiocarbon dating of the spring tufa. For the time being, we have 21 dates from distinct springs. You can see the results on the slide. The dates are shown here as yellow boxes in the upper part of the figure, where each box represents one radiocarbon date. As expected, the activity of most of the springs falls within the early and middle Holocene. That means into the Holocene part of the African Humid Period. Also, as expected, the dates are outside the Younger Dryas phase. However, of surprise are 3 dates falling within the Boring and Allerod warming, and furthermore, 2 dates within the late Pleniglacial. These facts point to the occurrence of rainfall in this region prior to the Holocene, and also even before the African Humid Period. These dates indicate an existence of a climatic window of opportunity for human occupation already between 15,000 and 11,000 BC. Evidence for such an old occupation is missing in most of Northern Africa, but our dates suggest that this may be a question of further research before it is found. Let's see. Activation of rainfall at the beginning of the Holocene allowed for succession of humid ecosystems into the Sudan. However, the timing, pace and character of the humid biomes succession to the Sahel and Sahara could not be studied in detail so far due to the lack of data in the whole of Northern Africa. At the same time, this issue has a major significance for the understanding of the population of Northern Africa and the way of life of the prehistoric groups after the last glacial maximum. To extend the understanding of these processes constitutes another agenda of our project. Here, we present the model of development of the environment based on our evaluation of micro-mollusks, micro-snails, from secure and well-dated stratigraphies that were completely floated during the excavation. In total, 38,707 specimens of tiny mollusks, tiny snails from Shaqadud main site and site S24 was assigned to 17 taxa. With all of them, we know the requirements of the habitat. We further divided the taxa in 4 groups. In the graph, yellow marks taxa living in dry conditions of semi-desert character. Orange is for taxa that need well-developed and deep soil for their life. Green is for taxa that need permanent tree cover, and black for taxa living permanently in fresh water. The changes in proportion between these 4 groups over time indicate the following changes of the environment. In the period between 9,700, so the very beginning of the Holocene, and 9,400 BC, semi-desert dominated in the area. The period between 9,400 and 7,800 BC is characterized by a progressive succession of humid ecosystems. Deep soil develops and the number of trees rapidly increases. Still, this process took quite a long time, some 1600 years. Around 7,800 BC, humid ecosystems culminate in the region. This point can be marked as the peak of the climatic optimum around the 16th degree of northern latitude in the whole Africa. Between 7,800 and 4,000 BC, the data documents a slow but continuous retreat of humid ecosystems and overall decrease of humidity. During this period, our evidence shows 2 gaps during which oscillation in either direction could have theoretically occurred. The above outlined picture of development of the environment is independently confirmed by our pilot study of phytoliths, wood charcoal and other botanical microremains not shown at this presentation. So, these were some of the important insights gained by our project over the last 3 years. Still, we have many tasks ahead of us. However, our main and long-term aim is to establish hinterland archaeology in Northern Africa and to promote excavations in today's deserts and dry savannas beyond rivers and away from rivers and lakes. Already now, we can say that arid hinterlands have a potential to provide sources of groundbreaking knowledge of the human past. So, I would like to thank some institutions and people shown on the slide. I'd like to stress that this research and the project is supported by Lumina Queruntul Award granted to me by the Czech Academy of Sciences. And I thank you for your attention.
know more about the geology of the area and how is the elevation of the site?
They are around some 500 above sea level. The mountains are not that high. That in fact it's are raised plateaus of the sandstone, like all remnants of a sandstone original plateaus, which are high, let's say 50 meters above the plains. Yes. And so this is a sandstone, and it contains a lot of springs, which we could find. We were able to find them there, and it seems that this type of this is part of the Nubian sandstone formation, which goes across the Northeast Africa up to the Arabic Peninsula, and it's the largest aquifer in Africa with a deep water aquifer. But also, our evidence shows that many of these sandstone outcrops were able to provide the spring water, which is in fact the superficial water from the rainfall. It's not, most of the springs are just 10, 50 meters above the top of from the top of the plateaus. And we think that the springs may have been dispersed in much larger areas than our research area, which must have attracted people in the past and allowed them to stay away from rivers and lakes. This is what our results show. So we think this shows like great potential of this geological setting for a much larger area than is even Sudan.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any more questions? Maybe I have missed information, but I want to ask about the chronology of the graves you have uncovered.
The graves, well, we actually, these are graves which have been exposed by erosion. So we except for 3, we did not excavate the graves. And so most of them show no grave roots, and we just document them on the surface. Some of them show some grave roots which date them within early Neolithic, which is called early Neolithic, which is let's say 5th and 4th millennia BC. But as we know from earlier graves from Sudan, the Mesolithic, in case there are Mesolithic graves, there is a low probability to find anything indicative of this dating. So only the direct dates could help. And we are now waiting. Actually, every day we are expecting results of C14 dates of 3 of the graves. So I don't exclude the burying started already during the hunter-gatherer, let's say, phase of the occupation. But at least from the 5th millennium, we can expect, and we have evidence for the presence